20 years ago, the call-up began. Vermont military members started deploying to the Middle East as part of the global war on terror. Over the years, more than 3,000 Vermonters served in Iraq and Afghanistan. 40 with Vermont ties were killed in combat. Dozens were injured, and hundreds more suffered invisible wounds like post-traumatic stress disorder. And for far too many, the battle back home became too much. Tonight, we investigate suicides after service and if the problem is even worse than the government claims.
Just a kid full of life. That's probably the best way to describe her.
An athlete who earned the nickname Boom Boom when she played on the boys' hockey team. Adventurous as an accomplished skydiver and adored. Susan Sweetzer's daughter Ginny loved fun, her family, friends, and her country.
We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center.
And when terrorists attacked, she needed to serve.
She felt called to do something.
Sweetser tried 3 times to talk Ginny out of joining the military.
So you know, those aren't my proudest moments. It doesn't make me feel like much of a patriot. But all I could think about was my worry for her.
But on the first anniversary of 9/11, Ginny joined the Army, and a year later, she deployed to Iraq.
It haunted her. And when you're really down, that's the place you go back to.
Ginny returned from war a changed person. She suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and a traumatic brain injury from a blast. The constant sniper fire, the deaths she witnessed, including a civilian boy hit by a suicide bomber, tormented her.
He died while she held him. But she didn't want him to die alone. She didn't want him to die in the street. It's so hard for us to understand the inhumanity of war because that's not how we live our lives. To deal with that level of inhumanity, it's really difficult afterwards to come to terms with it.
Sweetser says Ginny struggled to get the mental health help and disability benefits she needed through Veterans Affairs. And on December 11th, 2020, she took her own life.
And she took her gun and she shot herself. And there's no coming back from that. Ginny wanted the pain to stop.
A startling number of veterans die by suicide every day in the U.S. The VA estimates the number to be around 17. That's 50% higher than the general population. We obtained annual data on veteran suicides in Vermont, dating back to 2009. Health Department numbers show a low of 10 in 2017 and a high of 32 in 2011. That's a year after the largest call-up of the Vermont National Guard since World War II. Channel 3 News embedded with our Vermont soldiers when 1,500 of them deployed to Afghanistan. While the VA touts some progress in reducing the number of veteran suicides, researchers poring over the VA's data determined the agency's numbers are way off.
We were looking deeper into the data than I think was available for the VA.
Jim Lorraine is talking about Operation Deep Dive, an extensive study by America's Warrior Partnership, a national nonprofit working to prevent veteran suicides. It teamed up with Duke University and the University of Alabama, and what they uncovered is alarming. Their research shows more than 40 U.S. veterans die by suicide daily. That's more than double what the VA reports. Where, in your view, is the VA falling short in keeping accurate numbers?
Well, I think what the VA needs to do, and we've had conversations with the VA about this, is to relook at the definition of who a veteran is.
Researchers found numerous cases where a veteran's military history was incorrectly reported by medical examiners or family members, and that suicide was not listed as a cause of death in some small towns where coroners knew the families.
For financial stigma and other reasons, they may not categorize it as suicide.
In addition, researchers discovered record-keeping mistakes and that veterans no longer in the VA system fell off the radar, and when they died by suicide, it wasn't tracked. But the biggest discrepancies relate to drug overdoses. Operation Deep Dive looked at drug deaths classified as accidents or unknown intent, even though there were indications the veterans were suicidal.
The VA is strictly counting suicide. I've got an overdose rate that's coming up even faster than the suicide rate. We've got to be ready.
How confident are you in the data being put out by the VA in regards to veteran suicides?
I'm extremely confident in the data.
The VA disputes the findings and stands by its data, showing a 10% decline in suicides among veterans in the last few years. Though Veterans Affairs admits it's yet to see the full suicide study. Dr. Matt Miller leads the VA's Suicide Prevention Department in the U.S. So are you saying these findings simply aren't true?
I'm saying that the findings are not applicable directly to suicide as defined by the CDC and the World Health Organization. Yes, the data originates from the CDC. The CDC collects it from the states and then reviews it and sends it to the DoD and to us for verification of veteran status.
Miller says Operation Deep Dive gives a misleading impression that his department is overlooking veteran suicides. He says 70% of vets who take their own lives do so with a gun, but adds that another category of veteran fatalities is being looked at, so-called deaths of despair that could involve drugs.
I think they are undercounting it.
Senator Peter Welch is calling on the VA to do better. He wants greater transparency in data collection to see if Operation Deep Dive exposed a problem being swept under the rug.
There's got to be a forthright acknowledgement about what these pressures are and an accurate count of how many suicides are related to service.
It's too big to do the mission that it's given.
Sweetser, too, says the VA needs to reevaluate its record keeping.
I consider Jenny to be as much a casualty of war as somebody who is shot on the battlefield. I consider somebody who served in a war zone and came home and turned to drugs and died from an overdose or from fentanyl poisoning to be as much a casualty of war as somebody that was shot on the battlefield. But I don't know that our system really understands that.
She says a broader scope could prevent suicides through more means of intervention and prevent the heartbreak for the families those vets leave behind.
We're shattered. We're broken. I don't want another family to go through what we're feeling. I know I'll be with Ginny again, but I wish I was with her right now. This one went to Iraq with her.
Susan Sweetser has a room full of keepsakes from her daughter Ginny inside her Essex home.
That's Ginny's handwriting.
And keeps her daughter close to her heart, a pendant containing Ginny's ashes.
The pain that's left when somebody dies by suicide, it's there for the rest of our lives.
In 2003, the Army vet deployed to Iraq in the global war on terror. She spent more than a year under constant attack, driving military vehicles through insurgent hotspots. She survived, but lost the battle to stay alive after she returned home. At 39 years old, she took her own life.
After 15 years of struggling, Ginny was gone.
Ginny's struggle with suicidal ideation began right after she returned from deployment. She made this TikTok video alongside another soldier to raise awareness about the difficulties veterans face. The hashtag IGY6 stands for I've Got Your Back, to let other vets know they're not alone. But shortly after this video in 2020, Ginny shot herself.
Their lives will never be whole again without her.
Ginny suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder before her death.
That long-term exposure is a definite risk factor for developing PTSD.
Dr. Paula Schnurr leads the National Center for PTSD in White River Junction. The center's research guides Veterans Affairs on its clinical care for vets nationwide. Dr. Schnurr says 6% of the general population will suffer from some form of PTSD following traumatic experiences. That number jumps to nearly 20% for veterans who served in Iraq and Afghanistan.
One of the key factors is life threat. Being afraid for your life or being afraid for someone else's life. Being severely injured, witnessing atrocities.
She says PTSD increases the risk of suicide, but research, which began in the 1980s here, is helping doctors diagnose and treat it.
We can now give people a message of hope. It's not a life sentence. If you have PTSD, there's a range of treatments that can be effective.
I don't believe we have enough providers for brain health in Vermont.
But Major General Greg Knight, who leads the Vermont National Guard, says many vets have no place to turn to get help.
And that's immensely frustrating for us to know that I can encourage people to go get the resources they need, and we may not have them to give.
He points to low reimbursement rates from TRICARE, the health insurance provided to vets by the government, as the reason many psychologists and psychiatrists won't take vets as patients. And there's a shortage of psychologists to begin with. He's part of a group of adjutants general nationwide working to improve access to mental health treatment and to reduce suicides.
It's been rough. I've seen too much of it in my career.
Are there enough providers to help our veterans deal with mental health issues?
The VA is doing everything that they can to ensure that veterans are able to receive the type of services that they need in a time of crisis.
The VA says suicide prevention became its top priority in 2018. It began universal screenings for depression and suicide at all healthcare clinics when vets come to appointments. And at the White River Junction location, immediate crisis care is offered.
We are integrating primary mental health into primary care. We offer same-day mental health services here at White River Junction.
The VA also launched an outreach program to find vets who may not know of the services available to them. Peer support and group therapy are offered. And every employee here is trained to identify a veteran at risk of suicide, from medical staff to maintenance workers.
Veterans often will isolate.
And the White River Junction site is also pioneering recreational therapy.
So we do anything from adaptive kayaking to snowshoeing to golf to biking.
Getting vets out of their homes and in the company of others dealing with the same struggles.
And it gives them a sense of purpose. It gives them a sense of belonging. It helps them work on their social skills that they may no longer have or feel comfortable with.
There's no shame in going to find somebody and asking for help.
General Knight calls the VA in White River Junction the best in the nation, but he's lost 18 soldiers and airmen to suicide since 2007. And that number could be higher. Those who no longer get VA services, those no longer with the Guard, they're harder to track. The biggest hurdle in getting vets help, he says, is getting past the stigma that surrounds mental health care.
If you have some physical injury, you go get treatment, you go to physical therapy, you get your surgery. If you have high blood pressure, we'll treat that. That's not stigmatized. But for some reason, brain health is. That doesn't make any sense to me.
It's so hard to say goodbye to her.
Susan Sweetser says Ginny struggled to get the help she needed. And despite the VA's claim that it continues to improve mental health care, she says it's not enough. Not until suicides after service stop. Her forearm bears the message she wants other vets to know. The tattoo, IGY6. I've got your back.
If there is anyone out there who is thinking that ending their life would be the better decision, I'm just telling you, it's not. Don't leave. Stay. stay with us.